Hi, we're out on the range today, so bear with me if you hear gunfire in the background. 38 Special versus 357 Magnum in a Snubnose revolver. Well, before we go any farther, let me show you a close-up of what these two rounds look like. On your left is the 38 Special and on your right is the 357 Magnum. They're identical in diameter. The only real difference is the 357 casing is slightly longer. You may have heard me say that you can't judge the power of a cartridge by its size. This is the archetypical example of that. The 357 is just slightly bigger, but it's a lot more powerful. In a minute we'll demonstrate just how much more. So I've got two revolvers here. Now this is a Smith & Wesson Model 15 38 Special, and this is a Ruger Security 6 357 Magnum. They both have 4-inch barrels. When you're testing different kinds of ammo, different brands with different bullet weights will give you different results. So in the interest of consistency, we're going to keep things as much the same as we can. Remington green and white box 38 Special plus P with a 125 grain bullet. Remington green and white box 357 Magnum also with a 125 grain bullet. So let's go over to our chronograph and see what kind of results we get. So we've got our chronograph set up here at 7 yards. Let's start with the 38 Special and see how we do. $970. 947. 957. 943. Now let's see how that compares to the 357. So let's shoot our Security 6 357 and see how we do. 1458. 1452, 1454, 1473. Let's go crunch the numbers. So how'd we do? Well, our 38 gave us a mean average of 954 feet per second. Let's just round that off to 950. The 357 gave us 1,459 feet per second. Let's round that off to 1,450. That's 500 feet per second more. And when you're talking about the velocities you get out of handguns, 500 feet per second more is a lot. The 357 Magnum is a lot more powerful than the 38 Special. So where do we come up with the idea that a 38 Special is just as powerful as a 357? Why do you hear people say that? The thing is, when you make the transition to your short-barreled concealed carry type of guns. Now the concept is, the way this works, when your hammer strikes your primer and ignites your powder, the process of the powder detonating is not instantaneous. It actually takes some time, a microsecond, but still some time. As the powder burns, it builds up pressure, forcing the bullet down the barrel. The longer the barrel is, then the longer it has to burn and build up more pressure. So longer barrels will give you more power out of the same cartridge, up to a point. That's why you'll see handguns with 6, 8, 10-inch barrels. There's other reasons for that too, but that's one of them. So when you shoot out of these really short barrels, you have so little time for that powder to burn, you lose a lot of power. And the concept is that the 357, with a bigger powder charge, loses more power than the 38 does, especially in a plus P configuration. Well, we'll put that to the test in a minute. Now I have to point out that 40 years ago, when plus P ammunition first came into being, really the only thing it was just more powder in the shell. And that was done with the mindset that it was most likely going to be used by security personnel or police officers using a gun like this one. In fact, 40 years ago, this gun was owned by a police department. Today, 38 plus P ammunition is just formulated. The powder charge is such a thing that they're thinking that most likely it's going to be used in a concealed carry gun like this. And we've gotten some more efficient types of powders, and you get a little bit better burn out of a 2-inch barrel, so you don't lose near as much as you used to in that transition. But do you lose so much out of this that you lose the 500 feet per second difference? Well, let's go back to the chronograph and see if we can put that to the test. So let's try our Snubnose 38. This is a Smith & Wesson Model 637 with a 1 7/8 inch barrel. 827, 844, 839, 856. Now let's see how that compares to our Snubnose 357. Now let's shoot our Snubnose 357. Now this is a Ruger SP101. It's got a 2 1/4 inch barrel, which is 3/8 of an inch longer than that 38 barrel, but that shouldn't make too much difference. Let's see how we do. 1,252. 1,271. 1,244. 1,265. Now let's go crunch those numbers. So how'd we do? The 38 Special gave us a mean average of 841 feet per second. Let's round that off to 840. So with the longer barrel it was 950 down to 840. That's a loss of 110. The 357 Magnum gave us 1,259. Let's round that off to 1250. So from 1450 down to 1250. That's a loss of 200. So a loss of 200, a loss of 110. Yes, this did lose more. But the net result is it still ended up with 1250 versus 840, over 400 feet per second more. That's a lot more. So when a gun store employee wants to tell me, oh no, in a short barrel 38 Special is just as much as the 357 Magnum, 400 feet per second less is just as much, I want to hire that guy. I'm going to pay you $12 an hour, and that's just as much as 20. I want to date that guy's sister. No, honey, I'm going to take you to McDonald's, and that's just as good as Chateau Les Exorbitant. 400 feet per second less is not just as much. However, there's another aspect of this. When you're talking about concealed carry personal protection, you're most likely going to be carrying a hollow point bullet. Hollow point bullets are velocity based. Generally speaking, the faster you propel them, the more expansion, the more effect you're going to get. Way back when, in the early days of 38 plus P ammo, when you started shooting them out of these short barrels, some of those plus P rounds, the hollow points wouldn't even expand because they were still made for the longer barrels. Believe me, that's not a problem today. Plus P ammunition out of a short barreled gun like this will expand just fine. However, with the 357 Magnum, that hollow point is made to expand at 1450, or maybe even with a longer barrel at higher velocities. Are you still going to get expansion out of the short barrel only going 1250? Or even if you do get some, will it be a sufficient expansion? Let's put that to the test. So to test our hollow point's effectiveness out of this short barrel, we'll set up a very high-tech test. We'll shoot through 2 1-gallon jugs of water and then into our high-tech bullet stop, which is just 40 layers of fleece. We'll be able to see from the recovered bullet how much it expanded, and we'll be able to see how much damage it does to these jugs. So let's shoot from 7 yards and see what happens. That seemed pretty effective and I recovered the bullet. Let's try that again and see if we can get a consistent result. And there's the result. Both bullets penetrated the exact same amount of fleece, only a couple of layers. Both are expanded, both are mushroomed out flat, very consistent results, and without question, even at the lower velocities in the Snubnose gun, 357 hollow points will expand perfectly. Well, there you have it. The results speak for themselves. One thing I'd have to say is I am not saying that a 357 Snubnose is a better carry gun than the 38. They're heavier, they have a whole lot more recoil, the ammunition's more expensive, they're a lot louder, and they can be very difficult to shoot. So it might not be the right gun for everybody. I'm only saying one thing. It is indeed a lot more powerful. So, as always, don't try this at home. I'm what you call a professional, and thanks for watching the 357 versus 38 Special Snubnose video.